Matt Schneidman Show, Tuesday, August 27th, cut down day edition. There's a lot to get to today. There were some expected moves, some surprise moves, a new backup quarterback that we talked about the past couple days. There's a kicker that we didn't expect to be the kicker. A little surprise at safety, a running back that will not play for the Packers this season. Cut down day, always a busy day, Doug.
Absolutely. The biggest, I know we'll go through our surprises. I think you and I might have the same biggest surprise, but I don't know. There was just one that kind of stood out to me, and I'm like, I thought he made the team, but he did not.
Let's go position by position.
Okay.
And we'll take our time through these. And as always, if you have any thoughts on the roster, questions, concerns, the Nicolay Law Talk and text lines are always open here on the Matt Schneidman Show. 414-799-1973. Feel free to text in questions, thoughts, or call in. Would love to chat. Quarterback. They kept two. Jordan Love, Malik Willis. The trade is pending a physical, according to the Packers, which means by 3 p.m. today, a little after whenever they put out the roster, Malik Willis had not gotten to Green Bay to do a physical yet. So we'll see if he's in locker room tomorrow when we return to the facility for availability and practice viewing. We'll talk to Matt LaFleur and Brian Gutekunst tomorrow. But Sean Clifford and Michael Pratt both released. That isn't a huge surprise after we learned of the Malik Willis trade. Is that yesterday?
Yes.
Yeah,
right before the show. Or shortly before the show.
Right. Because it interrupted my workout. Right. I think the most likely scenario here, I know Bill Huber reported Sean Clifford's likely to be back on the practice squad. I think we could see it coming with Pratt or Clifford back on the practice squad. And then one of them potentially, likely, being elevated for week one just to be Love's backup for that day while Willis continues to learn the offense. We talked about it yesterday, how that could be a likely scenario, but that Willis would be the quote-unquote long-term backup for this season. I think Clifford makes sense because he knows the offense better. So if your desire is just someone who knows the offense better, and Clifford and Pratt seem to be on relatively similar footing with regards to skill, maybe they just want the guy in the immediate future who knows the offense better in case anything goes wrong with Love over the next couple weeks or during the game. Obviously, knock on wood, that happens. I think there are still a couple moving parts with quarterback, though, because let's say they think Clifford's a better long-term prospect. Do they take both of them on the practice squad? Clifford and Pratt, that is. Make Clifford one of your two game day elevations from the practice squad. Then release Clifford entirely. Don't re-sign him to the practice squad and keep Michael Pratt on the practice squad to develop him. I think that would be my guess for what happens, assuming the Packers view Michael Pratt as kind of more of a developmental prospect than Sean Clifford. And I'm going to add this caveat. I talked to my dad earlier today. He said, you said you would be surprised if Anders Carlson made the team. I said, yes, but Dad, I add the caveat to everything that I've been wrong before and I'll be wrong again, which is why I'm probably going to be wrong on that quarterback prediction, but that's just my gut of what's happening. We'll see what Goody and LaFleur have to say about it tomorrow.
My prediction, I hate making predictions because you don't know how other people are thinking. You don't know what the tape says. There's a million different factors that go into it. I think there's more of an upside to Michael Pratt, and I don't know that aside from knowing the offense better, just because he's been here for a year longer than Pratt, I don't see much of an upside of keeping Sean Clifford around. I just don't. I mean, I think there's three better quarterbacks that they have in their sights right now, two of them obviously on the roster, and what the practice squad looks like, we're going to find out tomorrow. I don't see it with Sean Clifford. I just don't.
I'll be interested to see if they think Malik Willis can get up to speed.
Yeah, it's a good question. And that would be the only thing in my mind, that would be the only thing that would save Sean Clifford's position in Green Bay on the practice squad.
At least.
Yeah.
Because once Malik Willis is ready, like I said, and then if you think Pratt's a better long-term prospect, then you send Sean Clifford packing.
Yep.
But we'll see what happens there. Running back. Big surprise today. And I think this is why I said for the past couple of days, Who knows what's going to happen here? I predicted Dillon and Lloyd on the 53, but added the caveat that we've been kept in the dark with kind of the severity aspect of Lloyd's hamstring injury and Dillon's stinger. A.J. Dillon will not play for the Packers this season. I think that was the big surprise of cut down day for me. They placed him on IR without one of those designations to return that we've been talking about, meaning he is not playing for the Packers this season. Now, there's always the possibility that there's another opinion out there. AJ and his people seek another opinion, and he gets feedback that you can be healthy enough to play this season. They reach an injury settlement with the Packers. He signs somewhere else, plays later in the season after he's fully healthy. There's always that possibility. So that's why I corrected myself when I initially tweeted he's done for the season. That's not official yet. But what we do know is that he will not play for the Packers this season. And it's kind of an unceremonious end to what once seemed to be a promising tenure for A.J. Dillon in Green Bay. We've talked about him ad nauseum this summer, about how his role was kind of shaky coming into this season. He signed for barely above the vet minimum. He's shown flashes of being a feature back in the past, but only really amounted in the end to a serviceable RB2, if that. And we kind of got the sense when Marshawn Lloyd was flashing this preseason that when healthy, Lloyd would be the number 2 running back. Maybe not to start the season, but at some point during the season. But what the Packers do at running back is they keep Emmanuel Wilson and Marshawn Lloyd. They put Dillon on season-ending IR. And I think Josh Jacobs might just get 10,000 touches.
He might. But he's got to stay healthy, too. He's had a couple of nagging injuries through camp.
Sure, but is Marshawn Lloyd, after missing the last 2 weeks and
he's
missing time at the beginning of camp with a hip injury, is he going to be on the field tomorrow? Is he going to be ready to contribute week 1?
Well, those are two different
Emmanuel
questions.
Wilson going to be RB2 in Brazil? Like, the depth there is a little scary right now if I'm the Packers.
But it wasn't going to get any... Sorry, go ahead.
I was just going to say, Josh Jacobs has been a bell cow his whole career. I've said it on the show before. He's second in the NFL in carries and rushing yards since he entered the league, behind Derrick Henry in both categories. So he's capable of handling that workload. But will the Packers want him to?
I think that's one of the things that drew the Packers to Josh Jacobs was the fact that he was so durable, the fact that he is able to, carry the load as much as he has. It's no shade against Aaron Jones at all, but he missed half of last season with injuries. A couple of them. And, yeah, I think he did miss. He missed
11 games.
It was 11. I thought it was 9. Okay. So yeah, missed over half of the season. So, and you don't know how severe the neck injury is with A.J. Dillon. I think for him for now being placed on injured reserve is probably best case scenario. It allows him to heal. It allows him to get a second opinion. It allows him to get that injury settlement, possibly, that we're talking about. I don't think he ever plays another down in a Green Bay Packers uniform.
No, I don't think so either. And hopefully his neck is fine.
Yeah.
AJ has been one of the guys I've gotten to, quote unquote, know. You never really know these guys too much, but he's one of the guys I've talked to most often over the last 4 or 5 years. By all accounts, seems like a great guy.
Mm-hmm.
Tough injury luck. It seemed he was, reformed, and I say that physically. It seems he was doing really well in camp. The team was really excited about how he came in. He seemed to have a refreshed perspective, an honest perspective about where he stood at this point in his career. But stingers are no joke, man. And I said the other day, when John Kuhn said on his show, once you get your first stinger, you never stop getting them. A.J. Dillon missed the end of the regular season and both playoff games with a stinger last year. And as I was talking with some of my colleagues earlier today, who knows how much more he would have missed.
They say the average
Packers had to keep going.
The average NFL career is 4 years. That's where we're at with AJ. So, I mean, I've talked to him in the locker room, every reporter who's been in there. I mean, he's been one of the go-to guys just because he's always willing to talk. He's always, got something to say. He's always, given me good, thoughtful answers over the years that I've covered him in the Packers locker room. I don't know what the future holds for him. I just don't know that it necessarily entails him being an active NFL football player. I think he could go in a number of different directions, but he's also always said that he and his wife, who's from Green Bay, I mean, they've set down roots in Green Bay. They want to be here forever. This is their forever place. And, but like you said, I mean, he's always been very upfront about where, he is, because you never know. If you play in the NFL, every snap can be your last. When, Joe Thomas had over 10,000 consecutive snaps, who would have thought that his last one, when he tore his pec, that would be the last time he ever suited up in the NFL is in his entire, Hall of Fame career. It can end like that. And it seems like for A.J. Dillon, it may be at the end of the road, which is unfortunate. If he wants to stay in the game, I think there are avenues for him to stay in the game, or he could do something else. But I don't think he's ever going to play another down in the NFL. And I certainly don't think that he's ever going to play another down for the Packers in the NFL.
It's the sobering reality of life in the NFL.
100%.
And life being injured. At wide receiver, not a big surprise, but Malik Heath makes it over Grant Dubose. Grant Dubose started the preseason really strong in that preseason opener against the Browns, with his blocking, with his special teams play in the Denver game, with his pass catching in practice as well. Malik Heath finished strong, and we've known he can block all along, but he showcases his pass catching ability in the last game, catches a touchdown. And we saw it during the regular season too. I've mentioned it before. That touchdown catch he had to put the Packers up late against the Giants in a game they really had no business winning. That was maybe Jordan Love's worst game of the season. And then Tommy DeVito kind of makes his 15 minutes of fame go in the 2-minute drive in that game against the Packers defense. Malik Heath would have had the game-winning touchdown catch in that game. So I took Grant Dubose just because it was more of okay, he's kind of flashed more this preseason, but they like what they have in Heath too. And I've said this a couple times that I'd be surprised if either of them was active on game day, because last year Heath was probably wide receiver 5 because it took Bo Melton a little bit to come along. He didn't make the team out of camp while Heath did. Now Heath is number 6, I'd imagine. And they're only going to keep 4 or 5 active on game day anyway. They can interchange Dubose and Heath on the practice squad and the active roster if they need to. So not surprised there. Not surprised that Samori Toure didn't make it. Not surprised that Bo Melton made it. Obviously, the top 4 were set. But the bottom line is the Packers have, I would say, one of the more balanced, deep wide receiver groups in the NFL. It's not as top-heavy as some others, but it's a group that I think they're really excited about this year.
Yeah, they should be. And everybody seems like they've taken that next step forward. Or you hope that everybody's taken that next step forward. And you hope that a guy like Christian Watson, who I still think has enormous potential, he's got, you can't coach size, you can't coach speed to a certain extent. Don Beebe has tried. He's just got to hang on to the ball a little bit better. But again, we were saying the same thing about Devontae Adams 2 years into his career. But the difference between Adams and Watson is that Watson's just, had so many injuries that it has kept him off the field. If he can stay healthy, I mean, that just gives Jordan Love one more weapon to go along with the guys that he's already developed real chemistry with, most notably Romeo Doubs. So, yeah, I mean, I think if you're the Packers, like you said, not as top heavy as some, not as top heavy as, say, Miami, for example. But I think that the depth is there, and that can really carry this team. And again, we've said it a million times. You don't necessarily need that number one receiver to have a great team and even to win a Super Bowl, because history has shown us that the Packers have done that. They have had deep wide receivers without a number one wide receiver, and they've been able to, have as much success as you can possibly have in the NFL.
After the break, we're getting into the rest of the offense. Tight end, offensive line, then onto the defense. Then the surprise of special teams was one of the surprises of the day as well that broke relatively early. We'll get into it all right here on the Matt Schneidman Show on the Game. Matt Schneidman Show, Tuesday, August 27th, brought to you by Potawatomi Sportsbook, a new era in sports betting. And if you were betting on the Packers taking 4 tight ends, like I would have if I bet on that kind of stuff, I would have been wrong. We talked about the quarterbacks, the running backs, the wide receivers in the first segment. Tight ends, they take 3. Luke Musgrave, Tucker Kraft, Ben Sims. Tyler Davis, like A.J. Dillon, put on season-ending IR, suffered a shoulder injury recently. And, Doug, this is one of those tough ones because Tyler Davis tore his ACL in the preseason opener last year, an injury that Rich Bisaccia called devastating because of what Davis meant to the special teams. And he was just getting back into game shape, game form, played in a game for the first time recently, and then goes down with a shoulder injury. And he's another guy who I don't know how severe the injury was, but this could be another one where, like Dillon, without knowing the severity of that one either, he could reach an injury settlement with the Packers, potentially play elsewhere. But it's one of those where as a human, you go, damn.
Oh, sure.
This guy worked so hard to get back and just to get hit with another blow.
Without a doubt. I mean, that's on a human level, all of these guys who wound up either getting cut or put on injured reserve or who do suffer career-ending injuries. I mean, your heart just breaks for them. I mean, I've told the story a couple of times. Former Wisconsin Badger Brady Ewing played fullback, I don't know, about a decade and a half ago for Wisconsin. I knew his family. His sister was actually my intern about 100 years ago when dinosaurs roamed the earth. But I got to know the family. I knew Brady before he ever set foot on campus at Wisconsin. He played 4 years, was a team captain, got drafted in the 5th round by the Atlanta Falcons. First preseason game, he's on teams, and he tears his ACL on the opening kickoff of his first preseason game of his entire career. And he got IR, obviously, for his first year, got injured. In his second season with the Falcons, they wound up cutting him, went to Jacksonville, got injured, and then he retired. So it can be over like that. It just, your heart just breaks for these guys because they put so much into it. Just on a human level, I mean, it's heartbreaking, really. And you feel for Tyler Davis. He worked so hard to get back. But every time I think about those career-ending injuries that, sometimes guys just are beset with, injury after injury, and they work so hard to get back. I mean, I know how hard Brady worked to get back on the field, first for Atlanta, then for Jacksonville, and it just didn't work out. And sometimes that's just the way the football goes. Being in the NFL, sometimes you see a lot of the glory, you see a lot of the fame, you see a lot of the money that goes around, but there can be a dark side to it too. There can be a tough side to it as well. So yeah, your heart breaks for Tyler Davis, without a doubt.
At offensive line, they kept 10. The Royce Newman experiment ends. The Caleb Jones experiment ends. I would be surprised if either of those guys were back on the practice squad. They keep the quote-unquote locks, Rasheed Walker, Elton Jenkins, Josh Myers, Jordan Morgan, Sean Ryan, Zach Tom, Jacob Monk. And then they keep Andre Dillard. They keep Kadeem Telfort. They keep Travis Glover, the rookie 6th-round pick. And then I think there's one more that I'm missing. No, that's it. That's 10 right there.
Yeah.
Maybe a little more tackle depth than I forecasted. In all my projections, I had them keeping 9. I had them keeping, in the end, one of Telfort or Glover.
Mm-hmm.
But I think they see, I would guess, Andre Dillard as the immediate swing tackle and Telfort and Glover as more developmental guys. But nonetheless, they have some freakish, physically gifted guys at tackle in that room. And with Caleb Jones, he was the same, but he never really amounted into anything. He kind of reached his limit of, okay, if he's not doing anything by year 3, which is what I think it was, then it's probably time to cut bait. Let's see if they can get more out of Telfort and Glover, kind of like what they did with Josh Nijman.
Mm-hmm. Yeah, I wasn't really surprised by anything in the offensive line. I mean, you are still hoping for Jordan Morgan's health. You're still hoping for that, shoulder to get injured, or the injured shoulder to get better.
You're hoping for a shoulder to get injured?
Obviously misspoke. You hope for the injured shoulder to get better, obviously. And you also hope that, when he is able to get back out onto the field, you wonder about his conditioning too, because he's been out for a few weeks now. So, I mean, that's part of the equation, but I wasn't surprised by anything on the offensive line.
Yeah, it was pretty cut and dry. I thought it was going to be cut and dry on the defensive line. It was that interior defensive line with the 5 that we thought were going to making it. Kenny Clark, Devontae Wyatt, TJ Slayton, Carl Brooks, Colby Wooden, Jonathan Ford with one of those IR designated to return tags. So I initially thought, because it's a new rule, I didn't really understand how it worked a little while ago. You have to miss the first 4 games like you do if you're put on IR during the season. So Jonathan Ford on IR for the first 4 games. He would probably be brought back on the practice squad anyway. And then at defensive end, Aaron Mosby made the team. That's not one I saw coming.
I didn't see that one either. He was a quarterback's nightmare on Saturday. I mean, he made play after play on Saturday, and maybe that's a case of a guy that in the last preseason game put it all on tape and made the team. Yeah, it doesn't happen very often, but there's your example.
And we said all along, and this remains true, it hasn't changed. The truth of it is that the Packers probably aren't going to need Aaron Mosby on defense this year. That's where he shined. He had a couple nice batted passes at the line of scrimmage during practice that I noticed. He obviously had the fumble in the game on Saturday, the forced fumble that Anthony Johnson Jr., and we'll get to him later.
Yeah, no kidding. That's my surprise.
Picked up for a touchdown. And then he had the interception dropping into coverage. It's kind of what Joe Barry wanted Preston Smith to be all those years, just dropping into coverage and picking people off.
Right.
But Aaron Mosby makes the team. Good for him. Is he going to contribute much on defense? I don't know. But seems like the Packers have some depth there with Cox and Mosby. Brenton Cox making the team for the 2nd year in a row out of camp as a 2023 undrafted free agent. And then Mosby, they're going to have to play special teams. That's what bottom of the depth chart guys have to do. But that's a position where guys rotate. And it's not just the 2 starters playing like it is perhaps at outside cornerback. Are there going to be injuries? Preston Smith's getting up there in age, although he's been very, very durable. He's missed 1 game in his career, which is remarkable. Rashawn Gary missed a lot of time last year. That was obviously with an ACL, but you never know when there are going to be injuries. Kingsley Nagbari is dealing with some stuff this summer. He's healthy now, but you just never know. And it can't hurt to have as many guys that can get after the quarterback as possible.
Without a doubt. And with Aaron Mosby, I mean, I think that I don't know how much he's going to contribute, but listen, everybody plays, whether it's on teams, whether it's when somebody gets injured, whether it's a severe injury or an injury that's less severe. You need guys that are playmakers, and that's Aaron Mosby showed that he was a playmaker, and good for him. I didn't anticipate him making the team, but I'm happy for him that he did, because I mean, he can show. He's a perfect example of a guy who, in these preseason games, we always say that there's maybe 3, 4, maybe 5 jobs that are truly, truly open, and his was one of them. And he made the team. Good for him.
Linebacker. Again, what happened there was what we kind of anticipated.
Yeah. Christian Welch made plays too, but it wasn't enough.
He made plays too, and I grouped him and Aaron Mosby together in that same category because they were both guys who made plays on defense. I was like, if they're going to make the team, they're going to be the last guy in their position group to make the team. So, Sure, it's nice that they make plays on defense, and it's always good to have a guy like that on your practice squad if guys go down. But it's about what they can do on special teams. And Christian Welch, I would imagine more so than Aaron Mosby, is a big-time special teams guy. That's where he's made his bread and butter in this league. Christian Welch, I believe, in his 5th year.
I believe so.
Special teams ace, like to Tyler Davis, like an Eric Wilson. But I guess the Packers just thought that they wanted more bodies at defensive end instead of at linebacker. I would imagine Christian Welch comes back on the practice squad. He's not subject to waivers because he has more than 4 years of service time, I believe. So he's free to sign wherever. I would imagine he just wants to stay here unless another team throws a bag at him, which I don't anticipate happening. So,
but there's a big difference though between, if somebody signs him to an active roster, even if it's the last guy. I mean, there's still, as we talked about on last night's show, you're making 10 to 15 times what you're making just in week to week, just being on the active roster as opposed to being on the practice squad.
Of course. There's no doubt about that. If someone offers you an active roster spot, even if you're comfortable here, you're from Wisconsin, you go where someone's offering you an active roster spot. I would be very, very surprised if that happens. I know he's not subject to waivers. We've said on here the last Packer claimed on waivers was Taysom Hill. I guess we can throw Christian Welch in that group, even though he's not subject to waivers. If a guy the Packers cut gets claimed or signed, we can all kind of toss him in the same group. Not going to happen. But he could be a valuable piece to have on the practice squad because if you want one of your two or both of your game day call-ups, game day elevations to be a special teams ace, that's Christian Welch for you.
Yep.
Christian Welch can still play special teams at least 3 times because that's the limit of times you're allowed to be elevated from the practice squad before they have to sign you to the active roster. It would maybe not stun me, but surprise me a little bit if Christian Welch wasn't a multiple-time practice squad elevation. Now, corner, there were some surprises there. Maybe just one surprise. The expecteds were Jair Alexander, Keyshawn Nixon, Eric Stokes, Carrington Valentine, Corey Ballantyne. I thought Kalen King was going to make the team. I really did. I thought he flashed enough, gave the Packers enough reason to say, you know what, we might have a steal here in a 7th-round pick, who, Dane Brugler, our draft guy at The Athletic, projected as a first-round pick before the 2024 season, and then Kalen King just kind of fell off the face of the earth his junior year at Penn State. But that's a guy who they should be able to get back on the practice squad, and if there are injuries, like there have been in prior years at corner, he could also be a game day elevation. How surprised were you by that one?
I'm sorry, I was on the phone. Who were you talking about?
King?
Maybe a little bit. I thought that I thought that he showed out. I thought he made some nice plays. So I guess I'm not shocked by Kalen King. Have you talked about Anthony Johnson Jr. yet? Because that's the one.
We're going in order. We went corner first. Was there anyone worthwhile on the phone?
No.
Was it someone who wanted to get on the air?
No. It was just somebody who wanted to talk about how rich you can get on the practice squad.
Oh, okay. Yeah, it's a nice living. I'm just saying compared to the active roster.
Yeah.
You want to talk about safety?
I mean, we can, because that's the one that jumped off the page to me.
That's the one that jumped off the page to you. At safety, Anthony Johnson Jr. does not make the team. Zane Anderson does. Now, I don't think this surprised me as much as it did you, Doug, because safety is a spot where they're only going to play 3 of their guys, barring injury. And those 3 guys, at least at the start of the season, are Xavier McKinney, Evan Williams, and Javon Bullard. Maybe they only play 2. But after that, you got to be able to help on special teams. And Anthony Johnson Jr. did do some nice things. He had his stint starting at the beginning of camp. And by stint, I mean like 1 or 2 days probably. But then the rotation started to favor Bullard and Williams. Anthony Johnson Jr. can hit like a mofo.
Yes,
he did in the game on Saturday. He returned the fumble for a touchdown. He had a pick or 2 in camp. So he's made some plays. But guess who's the ace special teamer, the core special teamer? It's Zane Anderson. So people are up in arms about Anthony Johnson Jr. not making it or whoever else not making it. You got to remember, special teams at the bottom of the depth chart. Zane Anderson's a special teamer. That's how he makes his living.
No, I get that. I just thought honestly, I just thought Anthony Johnson Jr. showed that, he belonged on the roster. I thought that he showed that, he was, yes, he can hit like a Mack truck. We all know that, but he also, was somebody who made plays. He was somebody who, I thought he played well enough last year. And I thought that he played well enough in the preseason. I just thought that, I understand what you're saying about special teams. I get it. I understand. That one just surprised me. I mean, look, there were 37 cuts and a couple of IR designations. If there's one that surprised me, that was the one that surprised me. Anders Carlson didn't surprise me. That was Anthony Johnson surprised me.
Anders Carlson didn't surprise you?
Mildly.
That was my biggest surprise of the day. Not that he isn't on the team on Thursday or he isn't on the team in week 1. But that he wasn't on the team at the end of today.
Yeah.
That was very surprising to me because, like my dad rightfully called me out on, I thought all along that Greg Joseph would have to blow him out because Carlson was the incumbent. He has the benefit of being a draft pick. Maybe I overblew the Bisaccia factor of him wanting to not stay loyal to the Carlson family, but think something's in the genes of bouncing back from a rough start to your career. Maybe Carlson thought, I can fix another Carlson. Nope. Didn't happen. And Carlson, I have the numbers up here. Let me pull up the exact numbers for what they finished in camp on field goals. Carlson was 61 of 75, 81.3%. Joseph was 58 of 74, 78.4%. So Carlson outkicked him by a little bit. Joseph was not good the last couple weeks.
No, he really wasn't. And I'm not convinced that it's a foregone conclusion that Greg Joseph is kicking in Sao Paulo.
I would be surprised if he is.
Yeah, I mean, it was so, but just between the two of them, I look at I think the 32-yard miss killed him. I think that was the final straw. But you also go back and you look at the 54-yarder that he made by about 3 inches, and the 55-yarder that Greg Joseph made by about 5 or 6 yards.
Were they into the same end zone? I can't remember.
I don't know. I'm sure that I think they were, weren't they?
The wind was blowing into Anders' face, and I know, as I mentioned, there was that screenshot going around, and you never always trust, screenshots. You got to watch video, but I should have dove deeper into it. It seemed like the hold wasn't great on Carlson's 32-yard miss. Maybe LaFleur would have a different tone on that. It seemed after the game, the tone was it was the kicker, but maybe LaFleur has a different tone on it now that he's watched the tape. Regardless, that was my biggest surprise of the day. We just had to fill out an assignment for The Athletic. Your team's biggest surprise cut. I say Carlson.
Okay. He just wasn't good enough. And then I go back to what we were talking about, maybe the last 5-6 minutes of last night's show, that neither one of them were good enough. But you look at Anders Carlson and the fact that, he missed more extra points last year than anybody else. I don't feel like he could necessarily be trusted with a big kick. And
no,
he made everybody nervous. I never thought, as you know, just because one brother does something spectacular doesn't mean the next brother is going to. And I've used the Adetokounmpo family as an example of that. I think with Anders Carlson, he had a full off season to fix what went haywire last year. And when he came back, it wasn't that fixed. And maybe it was just time to cut ties. So I was mildly surprised, but yeah, nothing more than that. Not any more than mildly surprised. I mean, okay. I really wasn't. Just he wasn't good enough. And I'm not saying that Greg Joseph blew him out of the water. I'm not even saying that Greg Joseph was that much better than him. I just think he's maybe a little bit steadier, perhaps, except for the last week and a half, which I thought doomed Greg Joseph, but apparently not. But I can't say that with Anders Carlson, with as inconsistent as he's been. I mean, we were also sold that he's got this incredibly strong leg. And I don't know that we saw that either.
An indoor 56-yarder with him in Atlanta, or 51, whatever it was.
Yeah.
It's kind of fishy from the jump.
Yeah. And that's what we were sold when the Packers drafted him. So all these things kind of add up. And it just, again, it's like, I think the Packers can do better. And I think that they think and thought that they can do better than Anders Carlson. Whether that's Greg Joseph or not, we'll find out over the next week plus or so, probably less than that, as we'll
find out in the next
probably 24 hours.
Less than that.
Yeah.
His waiver wire, I think, is done at 11 tomorrow morning. Or that's when we find out who claimed people, 11 or 12. I'd have to check on the exact time.
But so Anders Carlson didn't blow me away.
My surprise, like I've said, does not come from the fact that Carlson was cut as much as it does from the fact that Carlson made it, or Carlson got cut and Joseph made it.
That's fair.
I guess in that respect, I am surprised Carlson got cut, but I think this position is the biggest area of concern for the Packers going into the season.
Still is. Position. Absolutely.
And like you said, we don't know if Greg Joseph is going to be the Packers kicker tomorrow afternoon. Because at one point I thought heck, maybe the Packers don't have any kickers on their initial 53. They cut Carlson and Joseph, and then they just claim a guy they like tomorrow who's available on waivers or sign a free agent. But I do understand the rationale of, well, if a guy doesn't become available or someone above us on the waiver wire claims a kicker, we don't want to be left with no kickers on our roster.
Sure.
So what this tells us, at the very least, is that they think Greg Joseph is a better insurance policy than Anders Carlson. I would be surprised, and I think you would be too. I don't want to put words in your mouth, though, if Greg Joseph was the week 1 kicker. Because LaFleur used the same terminology for the backup quarterback position as he did the kicker position on Saturday postgame.
And it wouldn't be the first time.
In some way, shape, or form, he said, we're going to weigh all our options. We might look elsewhere, basically. They did for quarterback and trading for Malik Willis, which probably means they're doing that for kicker. They were able to get a trade done for a quarterback. They're not going to trade a draft pick for a kicker. So maybe they just wait for the waiver wire, but they wanted to protect themselves in case the guy they wanted didn't get cut, or if another team claimed him ahead of them.
Somebody asked me earlier today what my thoughts as to whether or not Greg Joseph is going to be the kicker on opening night in Sao Paulo. I said maybe slightly above 50-50 for me. I don't know. I mean, but I mean, those still aren't great odds. It means that somebody else got cut that the Packers like better.
I would say 30-70.
Okay.
Just because it doesn't seem like, and this is not unexpected, because if a kicker gets cut, he's probably not that great. It doesn't seem like the crop out there is that enticing. This isn't free agency where good kickers' contracts are expiring.
Well, and that's why I put it slightly above 50-50 because he's already in the building. And again, I don't think slightly above 50-50 are great odds. I mean, I would put it in my mind, maybe 55-45 or maybe slightly worse than that, but just slightly above 50% because again, you're picking up somebody else's, I don't want to call a human being trash, but you're picking up somebody else's trash basically.
And sometimes that works.
Sometimes
you think you can get more out of a guy than another team has. Greg Joseph was not infamous, I should say, but known in interviews this summer to speak in the third person. He would say it's Greg Joseph versus Greg Joseph. It's not Greg Joseph versus Anders Carlson. And he would say he wouldn't go 1 for 1. If he goes 7 for 7 in a day, he wouldn't say he'd go 7 for 7. He goes, no, I went 1 for 1 times 7. It's a very strange way of going about things. But at the end of the day, Greg Joseph not only lost to Greg Joseph in the kicking battle, but Greg Joseph also beat Greg Joseph in the kicking battle. He did.
And that's after he introduced himself to all of the reporters standing around his locker.
In the Greg Joseph versus Greg Joseph kicking battle.
Yeah. I enjoyed that, though.
Seemed like a nice guy. I've never had anyone shake all our hands before and after.
I don't know if that was a first for me, but it was less than 2 or 3 times in my career that's ever happened. But I liked it. I enjoyed it. It was fun. It was different. He's very friendly. He's very outgoing. And now, at least for now, on this August 28th at 6:42 p.m., he's the Packers' only kicker. For now.
We'll see what happens tomorrow. We got one more segment. We're going to wrap up any odds and ends from roster day. Preview what's coming tomorrow. Is Malik Willis going to be in town? Are we going to hear from the Packers' new backup quarterback for the first time? I talked to Aaron Rodgers today on the phone for a story.
Really?
Nice to reconnect with him.
Very nice.
Probably won't tell you what we talked about because I don't want to give away the story I'm writing, but it's not about him. That's all I'll say. Stick with us. Got a little bit left right here on the Matt Schneidman Show on the Game. What goes great with an Iron Jock workout or watching your favorite sport, a drink tumbler? Now through September 2nd, when you buy just $50 or more, not only will Iron Jock take 25% off of your entire purchase, you'll also get their Iron Jock White Tumbler for free. Just use promo code 25Tumbler. That's 25Tumbler. Go to ironjock.com for details. That's ironjoc.com. And to the text line we go.
All right.
The Nicolay Law talking text line 414-799-1973. Let's hit it.
All right. This is from Keegan in Queens. Schneidman, Doug, exclamation points after our name. Hey, nice. A few questions for you. Best guess on the biggest difference between the initial and the final 53-man rosters. Well, there's no such thing
as a final.
Yeah.
We said it at the same time. Jinx, you owe me a soda.
Next time in the press box.
It changes every week. Now, by final, do you mean week 1? Do you mean end of the season? Like, you just never know. I'll assume you mean week 1. My guess, just my hunch, is that they have a new kicker.
Okay.
By week 1. I don't know who it's going to be.
And
I would imagine there's maybe one other position player they claim and have to release in Aaron Mosby or someone else. My guess is Aaron Mosby would be the first guy out. If they claimed another position player, where would they claim that player? Running back, tight end, maybe to get a fourth tight end in there because Tyler Davis is injured. I don't know. But that's why we call it the initial 53, because it's ever changing and guys who make the team today might be out of a job tomorrow.
Yeah, the final 53-man roster is who's ever on the roster after their last game of the season, whenever that is. That's the final 53.
Yeah, exactly.
Are there rumblings? This is also from Keegan in Queens. Are there rumblings about surprise cuts on other teams / highly coveted depth pieces they're hoping fall through the cracks of the waiver wire? It's hard to pick it at this point.
Yeah, that's impossible to forecast. And guess what? If I were to text Brian Gutekunst or Matt LaFleur, they would not tell me, because why would they want it out there who they're looking at on the waiver wire? Because then that would just entice teams ahead of them on the waiver wire to pick up guys so the Packers didn't get better.
Correct. And let's see. And then most importantly, when will Brian Cashman call up Jason Dominguez? So he's obviously a Yankees fan. I don't know if he's a friend of yours or not, but that's Keegan in Queens.
I don't know a Keegan in Queens. I hope soon, because Alex Verdugo, he's figuring it out lately, but not great.
This is from Mike in Kenosha. He says, one of the best things that I love about Goody is that he's willing to cut bait with his bad draft picks. His predecessor would have held on to Carlson for 5 more years. Well, we're taking shots at the dead. That's not very nice.
Would you have said the same for Amari Rodgers and Jay Sternberger? Or did they just stick around as long as they did because they were third-round picks? It took until Amari Rodgers cost the Packers a game fumbling a punt return deep in Packers territory for them to move on from him at that position.
Yeah.
And that's when Keyshawn Nixon took over.
Yep.
If Amari Rodgers doesn't fumble that ball, we might never see Keyshawn Nixon as a return man for the Green Bay Packers.
I think
it's probably going to eventually happen, but there are some instances in which Goody does move on from his draft picks, some instances in which he does not.
Yeah.
But no GM's perfect.
Nope. And Ted doesn't need to catch strays. Come on now. Let the man rest in peace. I think it's something that happens all over football, that you always want to keep your draft picks as much as you possibly can, but sometimes you got to cut bait, and you can make the argument. Now, I don't want to be throwing any shade at anybody, especially those that aren't with us anymore, but yeah, maybe did Ted hang on to Derek Sherrod probably a little bit longer than he perhaps should have? Yes, for a first-round pick. Same thing with Justin Harrell. But you look at the 2020 draft right now for the Packers, I think the only player that's still with them, if we're not counting A.J. Dillon anymore, I think it's Jordan Love, isn't it? At least active, that's playing on the team this year. I have to go back and take a second look at it, but that 2020 draft wasn't great, and that was only 4 years ago.
Yeah, Andy Herman just tweeted a couple minutes ago, players remaining on the 53 by draft class. 2016, Kenny Clark. 2017, none. 2018, Jair Alexander. 2019, Rashawn Gary and Elton Jenkins. 2020, Jordan Love.
Oof.
So from I'd have to compare this to the rest of the teams around the league, but from Goody's first 3 drafts, 4 players combined: Alexander, Gary, Jenkins, Love.
So, but that's, I mean, we're talking of several years now. It's not like it's in.
Yeah, that's 6 years.
Yeah, that's 6 years. That's more than 6, isn't it?
18, 19, 20, 21, 22, 23.
24. Well, I guess we're not counting 24 yet.
We're 6 years past 2018, so yeah.
Okay. All right.
Alex Hale, you asked about Alex Hale before we went on the air. I think that's just a procedural move.
Okay.
They released him, but I think they can only designate a guy for IPP once you are forming your practice squad. You can designate him as the 91st guy on the roster, which is why he's designated as the IPP player during the offseason. But then once you need to get down to 53, he's not designated as an extra guy, as like the 54th guy. He's designated as the 17th practice squad member, and the Packers can't form their practice squad until tomorrow. It's just a procedural move. You got to cut Alex Hale, then they'll bring him back on the practice squad tomorrow.
On the 53, what is your over-under on moves made between now and 23 hours from now when we start the Wednesday show?
My over-under is 2.5.
Okay.
I'm going to take the under. I think they change kickers, release Joseph, and claim a guy or sign a guy, and then just swap position players. Maybe I'll go out a tight end and bring Aaron Mosby back on the practice squad. That's my guess. How about you?
Sounds about right. I would say 1.5, and I'd probably take the over on the 1.5. So I think there might be 2.
So you'll take the under. My under.
Your under, my over.
You're setting the line at 1.5?
Yeah. I don't know. You're more of a gambler than I am.
Don't say that. My parents are listening to the show.
They haven't figured it out yet.
Relax. All right. We'll be back tomorrow. Recapping everything that happens. Another busy day at Lambeau. I didn't know Xavier McKinney was Malik Willis's high school teammate.
No, I didn't know that either. I know I found that out yesterday.
Maybe we'll talk to him in the locker room about the Packers' new backup. Anyway, for Doug, I'm Matt. We appreciate everyone for listening. This has been the Matt Schneidman Show right here on The Game.